So your firm has a lot of experience helping vape companies manage FDA compliance and even working with U.S. Customs. Please provide our viewers a quick overview of your experience in this area.
We work with manufacturers, importers, of course, retailers. We have vape industry, so whether e-liquid, e-cigarettes, and of course the other tobacco products, cigars, smokeless. What we've done with our clients is, you really want to think about FDA compliance in terms of two prongs. So you've got just the FDA compliance side. So for example, with manufacturers and importers, we register their establishments. We help them with their product listings, their ingredient listings, their tobacco health submission requirements. When you're talking about the vapor industry and the vape shops, it's a very different experience purchasing a vapor product from a vape shop versus that at a convenience store. When you're at a vape shop, oftentimes these are small, a lot of them are mom and pop operations. They're also former smokers. And so what that means is that they care about who they're selling to. They care about their business staying alive.
Deanna, you're on the board for SFATA, right?
That's right, the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association. I joined as a business member because a lot of my clients, certainly in 2016, when this rule came out, we're panicked. All of a sudden we went, from no guidance or regulation, and understand we as an industry had been working on putting together our own framework of minimum legal age, of whatever manufacturing practices we could put into place. Was it perfect? No. Were we leaders in doing it? Yes. Fast forward now, SFATA representing the sizes it does. Of course, we have a base of the mom and pop stores. When I say mom and pop, yes, it could be one, could be 4 stores, could be 8 stores. And then of course we have the larger manufacturers. What happens though, this industry is so entrepreneurial, and so you'll have new entrants, you'll have people exiting as well. And people are scared. They're scared because with the uncertainty by the FDA, they don't know what to do. It's interesting talking about the court case in terms of sort of the FDA saying one thing and then turning around and doing something else, which, just simply makes it difficult for industry to follow the rules. In March of this year, they had announced, okay, we want to have this new compliance policy. They reminded the industry that under the Tobacco Control Act, none of the vapor products currently in the marketplace are lawfully allowed to be in the marketplace. It's simply that they had decided that they would go ahead and hold off. They put a stay, it's called, on enforcement. And so they then said, okay, well, anything that had been in the marketplace in the United States as of August 8, 2016 may remain in the marketplace, even though it had yet to obtain this marketing order, so long as everybody was working on their PMTAs. And in March, they came out with this new policy and they said, we're going to roll back a year. We're going to give the vapor industry, instead of until 2022, until August 8, 2021. So, of course, when the judge, in this case, the NGO versus FDA, they came out and said, all right, 10 months, well, okay, if FDA had made their own recommendations, and they did, I read through, the declarations submitted, how did we come up with the 10 months when just in March you announced to the industry we had until 2021?
We have the 10-month deadline that the judge, implemented, but it was really on the suggestion of FDA, and there'd be no reason why this particular judge would not have accepted that FDA suggestion, because he seemed to be pretty much in the bag with the pressure groups in terms of their attitude towards vaping. I'd like to read for you actually a quote from Bloomberg's reporting from the judge's final ruling. Given the uncertainty in the efficacy of e-cigarettes as smoking cessation devices, the overstated effects that a shorter deadline may have on manufacturers, the industry's recalcitrance to the continued availability of e-cigarettes and their acknowledged appeal to youth, and the clear public health emergency, I find that a deadline is necessary, and that is U.S. District Judge Paul Grimm. What do you make of that?
While the judge takes this position, FDA has very publicly explained how the vapor industry has come in and provided something that is less harmful than a combustible cigarette. And for whatever reason, rather than hearing the oral arguments of both sides, before making a decision. The judge simply took what papers had been filed with his court and made a decision, understanding, because this judge, he's an intelligent judge. He understands the gravity of his decision. He's taken a clear, what he would describe as a public policy decision on, essentially, it sounds sort of like a saving America's youth position, without really an understanding of youth experimentation and what, all youth are experimenting with all kinds of things, including combustible cigarettes. Of course, that's nowhere to be found in his decision.
Activist judges, certainly in district court, are not unheard of at all. But this particular judge does seem to be unabashed in his kind of support for the anti-vaping position. He says the overstated effects that a shorter deadline may have on manufacturers.
This is what oral argument would have, pulled out of the papers. The papers could only say so much. The fact is, the FDA, even though the Tobacco Control Act came out in 2009, the FDA still has yet, a decade later, to provide the industry with a set of regulations governing good manufacturing practices. The FDA still does not have its harmful and potentially harmful constituents list for the industry to go and get its testing done so that it can actually measure what are the HPHCs as specifically delineated by the FDA.
For our viewers, just to decode that acronym for us.
The harmful and potentially harmful constituents.
So what does that mean to the layperson?
It's a list of toxics, essentially. The toxics that arise from the consumption, from the heat, because again, vapor products are heat, not burn products. And because of the lack of combustion, which you get with a traditional cigarette, you eliminate all of these other chemicals because there's no burn. FDA needs more time, and the FDA said this prior to this decision. They absolutely have the discretion to set a later timeline, because the judge, of course, had said, oh, you're overstepping, your authority by giving such a long deadline. That's what the judge had originally said. And FDA explained, we need time to understand how we want to process XYZ and do XYZ. And the FDA, quite frankly, still needs time to do XYZ, because they then have to turn around, publish it, and give that to industry, who then also needs time to turn around, get in line to get its tests done, get the test results, and then go ahead and make whatever other comparisons they might make in relation to, whether it's an overall population study or what have you, to assess the impact of their product on the U.S. population. Because in order to obtain a marketing order, the FDA must find that your product is appropriate for the protection of the public health. That's the line drawn in the sand.
Does all vape retailers have to do PMTA, or only the ones that actually are producing an e-juice?
Manufacturers are required to submit a PMTA. Retailers who also mix, those are also considered manufacturers. So now they're considered both a manufacturer and a retailer. So the whole set of retailer requirements now also apply to the retailers. Do you have a retailer training program? Do you have age identification, age verification protocols that you train your staff on following? Do you have adequate signage in your store? There's all these retailer requirements that then kick in, which the manufacturers, don't need to pay attention to, because they're not facing the customers.
So the retailer requirements, are they in a PMTA, or is that a separate process?
So that's a separate requirement for retailers. The PMTA is only focused on those who are manufacturing. And FDA has explained that where you are a retail establishment, which also mixes e-liquids, they then consider you a manufacturer. So a manufacturer, because a lot of the shops, they take, the ingredients, PG, VG, nicotine, they're making it on site. And those companies are also considered a manufacturer in addition to being a retailer.
So that's the real big threat here then for the vast majority of the industry, is the fact that the retailers can make a pretty good buck actually by making an in-house juice. If they were just retailing devices and third-party e-liquid and not doing their own in-house line, then this whole PMTA issue wouldn't be an issue for them at all.
So if they were only selling other companies' products, it would not be an issue, except for the fact that, but for these applications getting completed in an acceptable manner where FDA will agree to even review it and consider it truly filed for review, they won't have any inventory.
With the final guidance issued in June, where exactly has FDA softened its language, opened the door a little more, might be making it easier?
So whereas in the 2016 guidance on the PMTA, they'd come out and said, probably if you don't have a clinical or non-clinical study, it's not going to be enough to get you through. They've softened that language a little bit to say, okay, if you do a short version of either of those, that might be good enough. But also if you do a literature or bridging study, that might be good enough to get you over the hurdle. And so whereas they were kind of like, that's probably not going to be enough, they've changed to, it might be enough. And FDA said, don't come up with something novel. There's standardized methods for conducting a literature review, for analyzing data. Use one of those, use a tried and true method. Great. I'm not trying to do this. I have researchers. I have PhDs who are doing this for my clients. Find the appropriate person to do it. And that was another thing that they said. The research has to be not only trustworthy sources of data, but it has to have been conducted by someone with the requisite credentials. So that's one area where I saw them loosen up.
Deanna, so based on everything you know, what is the future of the vaping industry?
While we have our challenges, I don't see us going anywhere, and I feel and I see it and I hear it. Where we're willing to come together and work together, we'll be a much stronger voice and we'll be able to push through. There are opportunities to share information. For example, in the statute itself, they do allow for companies to join together to do testing. A lot of the underlying suppliers for the ingredients of, e-liquids, it's the same supplier. And so if you're buying the same products, the same ingredients, you're using them and you're making the same exact thing, you can come in together, do your testing, share in the costs, and then use those same results. The FDA has given permission to use something called master files. Master files are something done by a manufacturer, and then they prepare a master file for submission to the FDA for anybody who purchases those ingredients from them to share in that file. Now, of course, in order to actually use it, you have to have on the letterhead of that company who owns the master file, so whatever manufacturer, for example, on their letterhead that they're authorizing you to use it. The problem is you actually have to find out from the manufacturer what is actually in this master file, or it may not actually be of any use to us. And so we need the manufacturers to be more transparent and actually tell those purchasing from it what is in this master file. If you let whomever supplies your PG or VG know, hey, I'm comfortable with you disclosing this. Should any other company say, I'm looking for somebody who buys the same exact thing, can you tell me? If you've given them written authorization to disclose that, then they can disclose that. They can't ordinarily just say, oh, here's my customer list. But if you as a purchaser give them written authorization, yes, you can share, and I'd like you to share. I'm looking for another company. They can do that, and they would benefit from doing this kind of matchmaking, because at the end of the day, if their purchasers can't manufacture, they're also going to go out of business. So it's, again, in everybody's interest to share and get along. FDA has invited industry to come in with its Premarket Tobacco Application plan. And originally in the draft PMTA guidance, they had said, okay, it's going to the Office of Science. We want to understand your science. We'll help you understand, does this make sense for what you're trying to establish for your PMTA approval? They came back in this final guidance, and it's still something that we submit to the Office of Science. We still want to share what our plan is. But that plan is within the framework of the rest of the PMTA itself. And so, while the industry can come together, it's important if you are working with another company on a literature review, or you're working on a bridging study because you do use the same ingredients, for example, you want to be sure to talk with whatever consultant or attorney you're working with. Hey, let's talk about the plan, because you want to take the plan to the FDA, have them go through it. They'll tell you this makes sense, this doesn't, etc. And, it's important to understand, is this research? Are these scientists, are these researchers that I'm hiring? And of course, it's expensive. What is their actual plan? Have you seen the abstract for whatever study it is that they intend to conduct for you? Or are you just spending money saying, hey, I want to pay for this researcher. Oh, we don't actually know where this fits into the overall plan. So that could be wasting your money also. You want to understand where it fits into the plan.
What do you think, Deanna, is going to be the cost for a successful PMTA application? And let's think mom and pop. Is it doable?
So the answer is it depends. It depends on, have they already started the process? What the FDA had required was, again, you could keep your products in the marketplace as long as you're working towards your PMTA. But with that, you also had to do all of the regulatory compliance that was required, which I mentioned at the beginning. So establishing registering your establishment, registering your products, providing any tobacco health information, etc. Those deadlines have passed. And so for somebody currently selling a product in the marketplace, they needed to have already done these things. And I have come across companies who have been selling, but never bothered to do any of those filings. They're that much further behind because the FDA doesn't, in effect, even know that they exist, in which case, because of that, their products are not even allowed to be in the market right now. We're 3 years since the date of the deeming rule. Companies have grown bigger, they've made more money, the owners have more invested in it. And people are scared. So with the opportunity to share in the testing, with the opportunity to share in the scientific studies, for any company who's decided, I have invested so much money, so much blood, sweat, and tears, so much good advice, and have helped other smokers stop smoking, you can push on through. Time will tell. But in the meantime, we have no choice but to push forward and accelerate our deadlines. So if anyone's watching, you haven't done, anything yet, or you're not comfortable with it, now's the time to go and talk with whatever consultant to try and get comfortable with it, understand what you can do within what time frame with the budget you have, and how you can move forward.
And your website URL has been up under your name throughout the episode, so I encourage people to reach out to Deanna. One last question then for you. Is there hope?
Yeah, I absolutely think there's hope. Certainly if you've done your other FDA filings. If not, you're actually just in another category and you've got plenty of time to do your application. Just means you're not actually supposed to be selling your products right now. But for those who, did those mandatory filings, there's absolutely hope. If you have your e-cigarette, there is that, again, I think it's UL 8139, the Underwriters Laboratory Standard. Of course, there are ISO that I mentioned before, the ISO 9001, 2015 standard. There are consultants who can certify, come in, help you organize your operations. There are other consultants out there to help you with the PMTA. You, of course, industry people, know of others in the industry, just like I know of a lot of companies in the industry. Go talk to them. What are they doing? How, if at all, can you work together? Go find that out, because there are opportunities to share in the costs, okay? So go talk to each other and be positive. Once we understand what we can and can't do, then we can understand, okay, well, if we can't do this, how about we do this? What's your plan B? How do we adjust what we're doing? How do we look forward? Because the future of the industry is one that's staying here. It's not going anywhere. It's helping too many people. It's employing too many people. It's a real industry at this point.